So that then takes us into our next talk that we've got this afternoon, and that is Adrien Joseph, who is going to join us. And I don't know, Adrien Joseph, if you have any slides or if you just want to speak to us. Excellent. Now is a good moment for you to hit those buttons. And so Adrien Joseph is going to speak to us about a number of different aspects, but I think builds on everything that we've heard already this afternoon, because I'm going to let you introduce yourself as well, sir, by the way. As you can see from the picture on the virtual wall behind his head, he comes from the Impact Negotiation Group. And so I think this is going to be really interesting to hear your talk. So Adrien Joseph, over to yourself. Round of applause.
Thank you very much. So my name is Adrien. As mentioned before, for the people that maybe weren't there, I'm a partner at Impact Negotiation Group, and I'm just going to bring up my slides so you get a bit of an idea on the company I'm working for. If everything goes well, you should. Yes, thank you, Sarah. So we're a relatively young company, founded by a few of my partners. We used to work together in a previous company. We're basically a consultancy specialized in negotiations, more specifically commercial negotiations. We do a lot of end-to-end support of negotiations using our consulting services. This can be cross-industry. We have a methodology that we apply and tailor to different industries. Sometimes, as many of the panelists here, we organize behavioral development workshops and a lot of on-the-job embedding to make sure the learnings stay on longer. We operate across Europe, UK, and the US in 4 different languages. So I'm going to take you to the heart of our business, which is a tool that we use in every day, which we call the Impact Negotiation Gauge. Now, this is a tool that we use to understand what type of negotiation we're about to enter. And generally speaking, what the prerequisites are for these negotiations. Following those prerequisites, what would be the appropriate behavior one must show in order to maximize the outcome of this deal. And I'll go in more detail in a moment. For now, just want your attention on competitive and collaborative. So when we look at a very simplistic view of a negotiation, we can think of it as a pie. Using the pie analogy, we can as the value that is present in a specific deal, we have a fixed pie analogy, which means we're basically negotiating one another in a zero-sum type of environment, where what I lose, you win, and what you lose, I win. This is typically what we call a competitive negotiation. And on the other hand, we have a pie, but this one not a fixed pie. Actually, by coming together, we're able to increase the value because things like trust, things like time, a few prerequisites are in place, and that would allow us to be more of a collaborative negotiation. So these are 2 big differences in the world where I'm from, because unless you understand this, it's going to be a very difficult exercise to negotiate, not knowing whether you're going into a competitive or collaborative. I won't go into too much detail right now, but it's a very interesting aspect if anybody wants to discuss further. So coming back to negotiation gauge, I'm going to go through a few definitions, and then we'll build from there on the trust part and why that's, in my sector, very, very important. So from a competitive side, if we look at an auction, typical prerequisites for an auction to exist is multiple buyers and sellers available, a very clearly defined scope, and clearly defined way to compare and assess different buyers or sellers. Moving on to distribution. A distribution type of negotiation, a buyer wants to buy, a seller wants to sell. Not much more than that. Then we go into enhancement. An enhancement, we're starting to enter in the more collaborative space. And typically a prerequisite needed there is a little bit more flexibility on the other party, some more openness, and sufficient time. And then lastly, we get to collaborative negotiation, and specifically a creation negotiation, where prerequisites are creativity, even greater flexibility, greater openness, transparency, sufficient joint time, and willingness from both parties. Now, only when these prerequisites are met can we judge for ourselves whether we're in an enhancement, an auction, or a distribution type of negotiation. Either way, we need to decide proactively whether we can influence that, and we do that by applying specific behaviors. On the competitive side, a way to maximize the deal and make sure that prerequisites are not in place, if they are, is a short, firm, distant, resolute, closed, and direct behavior. This is behavior that will allow you to maximize a deal in a competitive type of environment. When we look at a more collaborative deal, so again, looking at pie becoming bigger, appropriate behavior that allows you to maximize a deal there is more warm, open-minded, flexible, and you see this one coming, trustworthy, cooperative, and exploring. And so trustworthy is a relatively small aspect of the behavior that you see here on the slide, but a very, very big one, because it can have a lot of consequences on, well, the size of the pie that you'll be negotiating. So I'm going to give credit where credit is due, because trust as a topic, we discuss it a lot. A lot of our customers, well, it varies who finds it more or less important, depending on the type of negotiation they're about to enter. But for the ones that do find it important, it's a very big topic. So we don't only use our knowledge. We're very big fans of Stephen Covey and his book on speed of trust, which is something that we use in order to educate our customers on how to create more trustful relationships. So one thing to understand about negotiation is that negotiation is a form of conflict resolution. Yeah, one person wants this, the other person wants that. And basically, we are in a state of conflict to a certain extent. And you get a lot of resistance, you get a lot of no's, and you're trying to resolve that conflict together. But by default, it makes people relatively uncomfortable. People don't necessarily like conflict. And in our business, we know best negotiators are people that embrace this notion of conflict. Rare are those people that wake up in the morning and think, hey, today I'm going to generate some conflict. It's not really a thing. So because it's typically uncomfortable, creating a trustful or having some trustworthy behavior, trustful environment is not all that easy, which is why it's an important topic. So let's talk about trust. In my presentation, I'm going to use a bunch of quotes because I really like quotes. You'll see my presentation is filled with them. So the reason I use it is because I'm always inspired by these. And well, I like how it makes you think. So what is trust? And seeing as I love quotes, and I just said it, I rarely look at the dictionary specifically, but I use quotes of others. So Jack Welch talks about trust saying, you know it when you feel it. And for a lot of people, it's this thing that you can't really put a value to it. Huh? Some people say trust is confidence. But a clear one is the opposite of trust is distrust. And that one usually equals suspicion. And this one, a lot of people understand. When you trust people, you have confidence in them, in their integrity and their abilities. And when you distrust people, you're suspicious of them, of their intentions, of their integrity, their agenda, their capabilities, or their track record. So when we look at negotiating without trust, which I'm going to say more than 50% of my customers do these type of negotiations. Negotiation without trust, it's not all that great. Why? Well, for one, it's costly. If you don't trust one another, you're going to have to put a lot of penalty clauses in place in case of non-performance, because, you got to write and assess the risks that are happening. It's going to be difficult to create value. Generally speaking, in order to create value together, you need to get an understanding of each other's priorities, get an understanding of what someone finds important. But that's going to be very limited. If there's no trust, people are going to hold their cards very close to their chest. It's going to be more complex. Many more stakeholders will like to get involved, again, to assess these risks and cover accordingly. And it usually takes more time. People are often considered suspicious when there's no trust involved, and therefore they will always try to push for more, not knowing whether they got the best out of that deal. Here comes a quote. You can draw up an agreement thick enough for people you don't trust. I think this is a great one, right? Without trust, it's going to be pages and pages and pages of clauses, of things you need to cover yourself for. So, on creating trust. When we look at trust, and again, credit where credit is due, Stephen Covey, big fan, it follows a very specific pattern, a chain, if you will. And it starts, not at the easiest place, but with self-trust. It starts with self-trust and then moves on to relationship trust. Yeah? That's you towards the other. From relationship trust, it moves to organizational trust. And from organizational trust, it moves to market trust. All right, so let's start with self-trust. And for self-trust, I'm going to use the analogy of a tree. So looking at a tree and looking at self-trust is often, I think, used with credibility. Yeah, so self-trust, credibility, whether a person is credible or not. So if you can't trust yourself, you can't really expect others to do so. And being credible towards others is a first step in building trust. And in doing that self-trust, we want to make a distinction between two big parts, which one is the lower part of the tree, which is character. And then you have the upper part of the tree, which is competence. And the lower part of the tree in that character, it starts with integrity. And integrity, it's basically the tree's roots. And it encompasses the things you do when nobody's watching. Yeah. But it also means if you actually do what you advise others to do. That's a very simple one. If you're the type of person that advises people to work out, but you don't really yourself, well, what does that say about your integrity? A lot of people think integrity about just being honest. But that's only one element about it. It's also about being congruent and about walking the talk. It's the courage of acting according, well, to your beliefs and your own values, and whether you hold others to the same standard as you hold yourself. Then we move up the tree from the roots to the tree trunk. That's intent. And intent has to do with motives, our agenda. And typically, if we are, well, if we're acting in a mutual interest, if we're driving our own agenda, or we're driving our mutual agenda, we're doing something for you and me, trying to benefit each other. What is the intent you have here? What is the motive you're going into a negotiation with for? Then we move up one bit, and that goes into the, let's say, the branches of the tree. That's your capability. And that's all about the means we have to produce results, your skills, your knowledge, your attitude. Oftentimes, capability can be used to restore trust. You know, if you're very capable and you show good results, you can restore trust relatively quickly. Then you have the results, which in essence are the fruits of the tree, our track record, our performance and ability to get things done. So when we look at increasing self-trust, how do we go about that? Well, when we look at integrity specifically, try and make and keep commitments to yourself. And I see that, and diving into the subject just recently again for this presentation, one of the things that we often do is set maybe unrealistic goals for ourselves. For example, I did that I think 2 months ago. I thought, okay, I'm going to quit sugar altogether. That's a big commitment. And what happens, because it's such a big challenge, because it's pretty up there, you end up not hitting, or at least not being able to commit to that specific challenge, because you're going to have some sugar going around somewhere. You get very disappointed with yourself. So it's better to look at consistency. So trying to basically, instead of getting rid of sugar altogether, say I'm going to get rid of sugar twice a week. Small things, small steps, but be consistent. So you can basically rely on yourself, on keeping commitments to yourself and slowly building that up. But consistency is everywhere. So start small. Same with exercises. If you think about going and not working out to working out, don't set yourself a goal of 3 times a week. Start with once a week. Hold that once a week as much as you can, staying consistent. Maybe even think of twice a week to be able to hit that goal of once a week, and hold on to that. That will have an exponential effect on your own sense of integrity. Stand for something. I think that kind of speaks for itself. And be open. Yeah. And this can be a difficult one, but it's really about being open to other perspectives, other people's opinions, and willing to change your mind and be influenced by them. Yeah. And then we have intent. And intent, we can increase intent by, well, do something with motive. Yeah, motive is why people do things. You can increase it by genuinely caring, or at least saying that you care. Yeah. If you genuinely don't care, you're going to leave a lot of trust on the table. So try and showing you care, showing that you have a mutual agenda. Don't put only your points on the agenda, put their points too. And think of behavior. Yeah, people judge our motives and our agenda on our behavior. So poor behavior can lead to poor execution of intent. All right. Now for a quote. The only thing worse than a coach or CEO that doesn't care is one who pretends to care. So we've talked about self-trust. Let's move on to relationship trust. So relationship trust, that's, you have self-trust first, then you have relationship trust. And to start off with a quote, high performance perceive distrust as an insult. Yeah? This will lead to high turnover and employees leaving to organizations where they can't be trusted. So might be worth considering it. Relationship trust all comes down to very specific behaviors. 13 behaviors to be exact. One is talk straight, demonstrate respect, create transparency. I'll let you read them. Well, actually, don't even read them, because for the sake of time, I'm going to go through every one of them. So I'm just going to go through them. So, talking straight. Don't leave false impression, tell the truth, use simple language, and call things as they are. What upsets me is not that you lied to me, it's that I no longer can believe you. Yeah, from Nietzsche. Demonstrate respect. I think that's a simple one. You can judge a person's character by the way he treats people who can't help or hurt him. How do people treat waiters? How do people treat their taxi drivers? Create transparency. Try to be transparent, clear, and truthful, even when it's difficult, and above all, when it is difficult, from Jean-Cyril Spinetta. This is great. This is basically the opposite of having hidden agendas, secrecy, withholding, hidden meanings, hidden objectives. Want to avoid that. Right wrongs. Yeah, to know what it is, to know what is right and not do it is the worst cowardice. Right wrongs. In righting wrongs, it's important to be quick and going the extra mile. Yeah, don't just right or rectify a mistake you've done. Do a little bit extra. Show loyalty. Give credit where credit is due. Deliver results. Speaks for itself. Get better. The world changes. If we don't get better, we actually deteriorate. And one of the reasons people stop learning is that they become less and less willing to risk failure. Confront reality. Confront reality is basically take issues head on. Yeah, don't leave them hanging. Clarify expectations. Now, this is a very important one. What's to clarify? Oh yeah. You went over budget on this project. Over budget? What do you mean over budget? We only went 1% over budget. Well, 1%. In a lot of industries, 1% of our budget is not over budget. And some, it is. So be very clear on your expectations. Yeah. Almost all conflict is a result of violated expectations. Practice accountability. Start with yourself, then others. Listen first and speak last. I won't elaborate on this one because I think we've heard in the first presentation a lot on listening. Keep commitments. It's a big kahuna of trust builders. Extending trust. It's based on the idea of reciprocity. If you start trusting them, it's a big chance they'll start trusting you. This is from Berkshire Hathaway. By the standards of the rest of the world, we overtrust. So far, it has worked very well for us. So Berkshire Hathaway, they managed with their company 377,000 people with a staff of 25. They work on trust. Oh. Okay, I'm seeing I'm a minute over time, so I'm just going to accelerate a little bit. Okay. Actually, I'm just going to skip a few slides for the sake of time. Apologies. I have a little
You're okay, Adrien. We will find the time later, so just keep going. That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Great. I had a few backups to skip, but okay, if I'm okay, then I'm okay. In that case, a question to you. Take a moment to think on how you would describe a low trust organization. Take a few minutes. How would that look like, a low trust organization? Not a few minutes, Sarah, 20 seconds.
Okay, we haven't quite got that much time, Adrien.
Yeah, no. So typically what comes to mind is people manipulating information or new ideas being openly resisted. People finding getting the credit being very important, people spinning the truth. Mistakes are being covered up. Many discussions are considered undiscussable. A lot of blame game, many violated expectations, many meetings after meetings. Yeah, so yeah, stay here. We have some more to over promises and under delivery, low energy levels, and people often feeling unproductive. Now, how do you create a high trust organization? Well, do the opposite of that. It's quite simple. So going back to self-trust, relationship trust, moving on to organizational trust. When trust is absent in an organization, you can see it. More checks, more controls, and process, which we call bureaucracy. Going down to a quote, low trust breeds bureaucracy, and bureaucracy breeds low trust. In low trust organization, bureaucracy is everywhere. So how to increase organizational trust comes back to our tree. And here as well, integrity. Do we know what we stand for? Do we have a culture of honesty? Do we make and admit mistakes? And if we want to increase it, do we have an organizational mission? Can we engage everyone in conversation to make everybody on board with our values? You know how often values are changed around? You should ask yourself the question, whether everybody's on board with those specific values. Intent, do we have a culture of caring? Or are we just out to make a profit? And if we want to increase it, do we have systems in place that reward mutual benefits, collaboration instead of competitive behavior? Capability, do we have the right people? And are we attracting them? Results, are we able to deliver results we promised that people can rely on us? When employees aren't trusted, they pass on the lack of trust to their customers, and customers in turn leave. And this is really going back to relationship trust, organizational trust. Well, the last part is over there. And if you don't trust your own people, well, probably their customers won't trust them either, and customers will leave. So in the end, all you have is your reputation. So when we look at trust, there's a chain, and it ends up being market trust. And there we come back to our tree again. Are we seen as an honest company? Are we perceived as people that care? Do people associate us with excellence, continuous improvement, ability to change, and do our people deliver? So this is a combination of factors. If we are only integer and have good intentions, but we're incapable, it's not going to work. And if we're very result driven and very capable, but we have bad intentions, it's also not going to work. So and this is an important one. There are no facts, only interpretation. So you can do a lot of things, but if people interpret it the wrong way, it's not going to work. So restoring trust, easy. Look at the 13 behaviors. Now, when you look at the 13 behaviors, you start there. And then think of self-trust, relationship trust, organizational trust, and market trust. But it all starts with self-trust, and that's the most difficult one. If you can't trust yourself, showing integrity, following up on commitments, listening, getting better, creating transparency, and so forth. If self-trust is not set, then the rest doesn't matter. And this is me talking straight. So what now? Well, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. And the second best time is today. So we're negotiators. Yeah? We're specialist negotiators. And important things about being able to increase the pie over here, and where the pie gets bigger, is where there's high levels of trust, or as a minimum, to appear or to be interpreted as very trustworthy. That was it. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Adrien, for that